you, and we sure do want you back. And we're just having a good old time here, eating some cinnamon buns and drinking some milk and all that fun stuff. And I actually have some plans for gluten-free keto stuff too. So, all right. Forgot my tablet. I was gonna do some commenting on the thread as well. But, yeah, you want to just tag some of the folks that were mentioned. All right, everybody's still getting their cinnamon buns. They were just brought over. We got a little bit of a late start, but you can't start without the cinnamon buns. That's one of the important things about Wednesday night church. So I can't have one because I'm going to be doing most of the blabbing, but you should save one for me. All right, you'll have it for me. I like that. I like that. Yep. Tag the Merrills still want to be involved. Pasco's, because they were the ones who asked if we were live streaming. Romeo and Billy. Ralph doesn't have his own Facebook account, but Deb does. Tag Deb. Just anybody and everybody. And Steve is home with his wife on Wednesday nights more recently, and so yes, and Price. Price. Yep. All right. But Saints, I really do believe that God is in control. He builds his church. He keeps his church, and one way or another, I believe that he has a firm control on things. We have suffered gains and we've suffered losses, but I really do believe that God is in control. He really is. Kim.
This week, I listened to a program on WBCI called Family Life Today.
Yeah.
Comes on in the afternoons at 2 o'clock. And this week, I think Monday, Tuesday, and today, there was a sermon on how to deal with the political environment and all the controversy and how Christians should behave. And I'm sure it's available on podcast.
Cool.
It's so good. I even got John to listen to it.
Nice. Well, now I won't do one on it. I'm actually starting a podcast because I lost everything I was working on in my book.
It's so good.
Yeah, I'll steal all his ideas and do one on mine. The title of mine was "Will the Real King Please Stand Up?" And it just has to do about which king are we serving. But all right, 2 Samuel chapter 5. That's where we are tonight. The story so far. Last week we watched the end of the puppet king over Israel, Ishbosheth. Ishbosheth was already in a bad place politically, seeing that the very man who set him up, Abner, had defected to David's side before his death at the hands of two very upset brothers, Joab and Abishai. Now, rudderless and soon to be throneless, Ishbosheth found his end at the hands of two other brothers, Baanah and Rechab, who took it into their own hands to eliminate Ishbosheth. David did not take kindly to this, naturally, and had Baanah and Rechab killed for their insolence. Insolence is a great word. It's just a really good word. Now, David is set to ascend the throne and unite the two warring factions together, Judah and Israel. We're looking for a united kingdom here. So I'll take the blue paragraph and then the silver paragraph as well, because that's got a bunch of names, and I'm going to try to cruise through them. If you're reading this and you stumble across some things, don't feel the need to, make a joke or be self-deprecating. Just plow right through the text, and we're going to keep the focus on the text this evening and stay in the Bible here. All right. Then came all the tribes of Israel to David unto Hebron, and spake, saying, Behold, we are thy bone and thy flesh. Also in time past, when Saul was king over us, thou wast he that led us out and brought us in Israel. And the Lord said to thee, Thou shalt feed my people Israel, and thou shalt be a captain over Israel.
So all the elders of Israel came to the king of Hebron, and King David made a league with them in Hebron before the Lord. They anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 40 years. In Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months. In Jerusalem, he reigned 33 years over all Israel and Judah.
And the king and his men went to Jerusalem and to the Jebusites, the inhabitants spake unto David, saying, Except thou take away the blinds of the fame, thou shalt not come in hither. Thinking David did not come in hither. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, the same is the city of David.
And David said on that day, Whosoever getteth up to the gutter, and smiteth the Jebusites in the lame, and the blind that are hated of David's soul, he shall be chief and captain. Wherefore they said, The blind and the lame shall not come into the house. So David dwelt in the fort, and called it the city of David. And David built round about from Millo and inward.
And David went on and grew great, and the Lord God of Abiram the Hittite sent messengers to David, and carpenters, and masons, and they built David a house. And David perceived that the Lord had established him in the right, and that he had not done his kingdom for his people Israel's sake.
And David took him more concubines and wives out of Jerusalem after he was come from Hebron, and there were yet sons and daughters born to David. And these be the names of those that were born unto him in Jerusalem: Shammua, and Shobab, and Nathan, and Solomon, Ibhar also, and Elishua, and Nepheg, and Japhia, and Elishama, and Eliada, and Eliphelet.
When the Philistines heard that they had anointed David king over all Israel, all the Philistines came up to seek David, and David heard of it, went down to the hole. The Philistines also came and spread themselves in the valley of Rephaim. And David inquired of the Lord, saying, Shall I go up to the Philistines? Wilt thou deliver them into mine hand? The Lord said unto David, Go up, for I will doubtless deliver the Philistines into thine hand.
And David came to
Baal Perazim.
And David smote them there, and said, The Lord hath broken forth upon mine enemies before me, as the breach of waters. Therefore, we call the name of the place.
Baal Perazim. Yep.
And there they left their images, and David and his men burned them. And the Philistines came up yet again, and spread themselves in the valley of Rephaim. And when David inquired of the Lord, he said, Thou shalt not go up, but set a compass behind them, and come upon them over against the mulberry tree. And let it be, when thou hearest the sound of a going in the top of the mulberry tree, that then thou shouldest be speared thyself instead. For then shall the Lord go out before thee, to smite the host of the Philistines. And David did so, as the Lord had commanded him, and smote the Philistines from Geba, even Bozrah unto David.
It's quite a couple of stories, isn't it? There's a couple of really cool elements that I know we can capitalize on. I need a word of prayer. I'm just going to pray and ask the Lord to calm my spirit and carry us through this discussion of an amazing text. So I'm going to pray. Lord, I love you, and today I'm thankful for your church. I'm thankful for this church, and for those who are here and those who are watching from home. And I'm asking you, God, I've asked you this so many times before, but Lord, you know my heart, and you know the context, and you know the situation, and you know where we're at, and I'm asking you again, would you bring our church together at full strength once more? I'm just asking you to bring us together, to restore us unto each other, that those here would reach out and make others feel loved, and that those away would say, I can't make it without the physical assembly of God's people, and that you would just restore us to full strength. That's my prayer. That's what I'm asking. Now that I've kind of put that in your hands, I'm just asking for you to brood among the congregation this evening, Lord, and be with us in Jesus' name. Amen and amen. Cool beans. Okay. Then came all the tribes of Israel, finally reunited, and it feels so spiritual. What? What? And spake, he said, and they said, they finally get it, right? We're your bone and your flesh. We're your bone and your flesh. I think that's maybe something they should have recognized before, right? You know, exactly right. In fact, I almost made that the title of the lesson. It's about time. Finally. I couldn't have said that any more nasally if I wanted to. Finally.
At last.
Yeah, finally. So then it's like they're speaking from a script. They've had time to think about this. When Saul was king over us, you were actually the one who was doing the good stuff, you know. And the Lord said to you, feed my people Israel. You're going to be a captain over Israel. They have come to their senses. Question: is this just a coincidence that they happen to come to their senses here? Or is it because David's coming to power? Or did the Holy Spirit remove some sort of blindness from them? A combination of all of them? Any particular thoughts or insights on that section? If not, that's okay. Seemed to be pretty obvious, right? Ishbosheth is dead. Abner's dead. Who else do they have? Well, David, I guess if we don't have any other options, we'll come to you. Can I share something with you, though, saints? So many times we hold out and we go our own way for as long as we possibly can until our own way fails us. And then we come groveling to God. Well, a lot of us aren't humble enough to do that, so we just go our own way for the rest of our lives. I don't know why I looked at Kevin when I said that, but I'm just joking. I look at him for confirmation just to make sure I'm not being too caustic. But some penitent, humble will come and say, you know what? I was wrong. I chose the wrong leader. I chose the wrong influence. We sided with Ishbosheth because everybody else was. So here I am to tell you I was wrong. Now, they didn't exactly apologize, which is what we kind of should be used to with human behavior, right? Ideally, they would have said, David, I am sorry. But instead, they just simply stated the facts and said, David, it was you all along, man. And so they all came to the king in Hebron, the return of the king, the ascension. And King David made a league with them in Hebron. They anointed David king, reigned 40 years, incredible. And he gives some dates and things like that. This is one of the things I wanted to ask you a question about, because Michael Britt is stumped. I have some ideas, but I'm stumped. I say that like it never happened. It happens all the time. I get stumped about where I put my keys. All right, not my keys, my wallet. That gets lost all the time. And the king and his men went to Jerusalem unto the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, which spake unto David. So these are the Jebusites saying to David, except you take away the blind and the lame, you're not coming in here. Thinking David can't come in here. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, the same as in the city of David. So keep that in your mind, this outlandish, bizarre phrase by the Jebusites, and read the next page, the next section. So David said, let's get into this drainage tunnel, this water gate, and kill the Jebusites and the lame and the blind that are hated of David's soul. So whoever kills the Jebusites and the lame and the blind that are hated of David's soul, he shall be chief and captain. Wherefore they said, the blind and the lame shall not come into the house. So who is the they? We got a lot of questions about this. It's going to take a good chunk of our time, and I hope we dig into it. Wherefore they said, who's they? There's two possibilities. One, the people of Israel, the armies of Israel, saying, the blind and the lame shall not come into the house, maybe meaning the temple or the house of David that was just built. We don't know for sure. Or it's the Jebusites, and it's describing why the Jebusites said what they said in the yellow paragraph that we just read. Wherefore the Jebusites said, the blind and the lame shall not come into the house. Hence, them saying, except I'll take away the blind and the lame, you shall not come in hither. I don't think it anachronizes quite like that. I think it was the Israelites saying that, but I don't know for sure. So I'm going to read through that text one more time, and then we're going to discuss, because I'm curious what your thoughts are about this blind and the lame thing. Pastor?
Did you check your Hebrew Bible?
No, but I really wanted to, and I was going to do that. So, Pastor, why don't you read the yellow and red paragraphs while I go get my Hebrew thing.
That's what I'd like to find out, what the actual Hebrew said.
Yeah.
I think that makes a difference.
There's a couple of thoughts on that too. We'll get there.
The king and his men went to Jerusalem to the Jebusites, inhabitants of the land, spake unto David, saying, Except thou take away the blind and the lame, thou shalt not come in hither. Thinking David can't come in hither. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, the same city of David. I don't get it.
Could it be the blind people that are with David? But why would David have blind?
See, this is where we need Kim and Susan.
Yeah.
All right, Kim.
No, nothing.
She's just because I are one.
Yes, but you're also smarter than everybody else in the room, so.
So I
Sit
did
down
some.
Sunday.
Gotta have some context here.
I did some research on this earlier. It didn't bear a lot of fruit, to be honest with you. Some commentators feel like the blind and the lame are talking about idols, and David hates idols. Hence, David said the blind and lame, which I hate, which was a pejorative term for idols. We've seen that before. But why would the Jebusites say, what is it? The Jebusites say, except you take away the blind and the lame, you're not coming in here, thinking David can't come in here. Did they think that their idols were protecting them? I think it's Gill or Clark. I think it's John Gill, commentator, who thinks so. So let's check this out. In 2 Samuel chapter 5.
I'd really like to know if Hebrew tradition refers to that, what they would actually say in synagogue.
Well, this dude. All right. The conduit, the blind and lame. Ah. All right, so this is the altar's opinion on it. I haven't read this yet. This puzzling phrase, together with its even more enigmatic occurrence in verse 8, is the notorious crux, or center, or turning point, pivot point. The most disparate theories have been proposed for how to read the words of the text and how to reconstruct what is said to go on in the conquest of the city. The Qumran Samuel scroll for this verse, so the Qumran scroll would be the Dead Sea Scrolls, a distant but accurate recopying of the Hebrew text. The Qumran Samuel scroll for this verse reads, You shall not enter here, for the blind and the lame have incited, saying, David shall not enter here. This variant has the advantage of fluency, but one suspects it may have been invented to make a difficult traditional text more intelligible. That happened all the time in translations, by the way, all the time. And many times those have been captured into modern variants of text. Take that for how you want. The explanation proposed by Yigal Yadin is probably the most plausible. He points to a Hittite text for the swearing in of truths in which a blind woman and a lame man are set before the men with the monitory imprecation that their fate will be like that of those wretches if they fall in their duty. The Jebusites then might have displayed the lame and the blind on the ramparts with an analogous curse against those who would presume to attack the city. This taunting curse would explain why these maimed figures are despised by David. So something to consider. That's actually a really cool explanation. If there's a Hittite reality there.
Yeah, could that be like, like a creepy 80s sci-fi movie where you have the blind witch-looking people that were, I don't know. That's what my brain picturing.
Well, I guess for them it would have been a
superstition.
Yeah. Well, and the Hittites would have a vicarious. Hey, I tell you what, I'll just throw it out there. If I'm fighting knowing that other people's lives directly depend on my success or failure, probably. So they picked the most pitiable, according to this interpretation, the Jebusites would have followed the Hittite rule in picking the most pitiable members of their society and saying, you now share a blood bond with the soldiers. If they die, you die. If they win, you live. So they're displaying them in front of David so as to say, you can't come in here. You'll end up being the cause of death for these blind and lame people. And David said, "That's not on me, guys. That's on you."
Well,
You know, Kim?
That almost sounded to me like some of the Hebrew oaths.
Yes.
This fate will fall on you.
Yep.
You'll
Yep.
become blind or lame.
Ah, yes, yes. Interesting. Very
That's
interesting.
almost what that sounded like.
Yeah. If they fall in their duty or fail in their duty. Yeah, fail. I read the word as fall earlier. I apologize. If they fail in their duty. Ah, so their fate will be like that of those wretches if they fail in their duty. How interesting. Hence the sci-fi reading. Ryan, then Lucy.
Do you think there could have been lepers in there too? Is that
Maybe.
why they had to go through a different area? Because there could have been. You know, I'm not
Yeah.
usually the blind and the lame.
Sure.
Throwing out the city with leopards. Leopards. No,
Leopards, yeah. Wow.
So, I don't know. The thing is about the task thing. It doesn't make sense on that.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing it back.
Well, lame is the broad word. When we think lame, we think, I can't walk. Lame is a broad word. It could be applied to a number of things. I'd have to check out the Hebrew word here, which unfortunately I don't have because I don't have my iPad or anything with me. And I'm using the phone for streaming. But if you want to e-sword that, that'd be cool. But yeah, so it could be that. So whosoever strikes down the Jebusite and reaches the conduit, and the lame and the blind, utterly despised by David, therefore do they say, no blind nor lame shall enter the house. Now, interestingly, the house, I'm almost sure, refers to the temple. It almost has to, particularly because they're besieging Jerusalem. They're getting their hometown back. So no blind nor lame shall enter the house. So I'm not entirely sure there. Psiak, lame, usage by word, original spelling, Hebrews 64:52, to limp, to skip over, to hesitate, to become halt, to pass over. This one probably has a more narrow denotation or connotation as someone who is halted in their legs. Thanks, Rob. So one thing that's interesting though is we have to be very careful not to put David in a box and say, well, he hates lame people. No. Who did he later take care of? Mephibosheth, yeah. So David does not have any animosity toward lame people. He's not prejudiced against people who can't see and can't walk. What is the point here then? I think it's to reinforce, sorry, time out. Lucy.
Oh, yeah, I'm way far in a different section than any of you.
That's okay, yeah.
But I read this article, this chapter quite a few weeks ago, and I didn't know anything about anything, and I thought if I was a Jebusite, I would try to insult David by saying, you're just as bad a soldier as a blind person or a lame person. Can you see them as a soldier fighting with David? David was big on the soldier saying, hey, I'm a soldier and I can see everybody and I'm, so I thought it was being a sarcastic remark. You're a stupid soldier if you think you're like a blind soldier or a lame soldier. So I thought he was trying to ridicule him.
Yeah, and maybe even that concept.
Me.
Yeah.
The Jebusites were ridiculing David and saying, if you're not a very good soldier, if you're going to fight blind people,
right,
lame people. That's the way it came across to me when I was reading.
Yeah, and there might be some equivocation or transfer there, saying, David, you can't even attack or win over a blind or lame person. So that could be an insult there because they said, you're not going to enter here unless you can remove the blind and lame, which is to say that's because they were thinking David can't enter here. So it could have been they were insulting his might. Wifey?
What does the word hated? What is that saying? Is that like it's saying hate them, or like is that one of those ones that thinks it means lightly of or something like that?
So while Kevin looks that up, in the scriptures, when you see the word hated, I can't think of one time that it ever means the kind of way that we use the word hate today. Has to do with enemyship. Right here. Strong's definition of this word, the very first definition is, well, I can't say first. It says to hate personally, and it says enemy, foe, odious, utterly. It has to do with positioning oneself against someone else, standing at odds with them. And so, and I think, thank you, Kevin. And I think a really interesting introspection or look into this would be Jacob I've loved, Esau I've hated. Well, if anybody bears the gritting teeth hate of God, they're going to turn into a plume of smoke. Okay, they're going to not exist. Hated there is where God has set his face against someone. He said, "No, you don't." Why? Well, it's Esau, man. You know? Then again, Jacob was worse, right? But that's the whole point. Kim?
Or you've got to hate your mother and father.
Exactly right.
Follow Jesus.
Exactly right. So Jesus was never calling people to say, "I hate you, Mom." You know, that's you know, but he was calling people to count. Well, this is actually from that very text, to count the cost and to say, "I'm going to make some enemies by following Jesus," and some of those enemies are going to be my mom and my dad. We see that all the time in Muslim world, don't we? Absolutely.
So along with the cursing blessing from the crippled folks, from the handicapped folks,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they're even using them there as a human shield
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah, I had considered that possibility as well. It's a human shield, and they said unless you're willing to break through these blind, crippled people, which again maybe they're playing to sympathies. And David said, "Dude, I'm getting in there no matter what." Amber.
I also have thought of whether or not they are just being used or whether they're making the choice to do it too.
Yeah.
They've set themselves as their enemy.
That was the question that came across my mind. I didn't even really address that question in my mind because I was already so upside down on this. But who's to say that these blind and lame are victims here? I have a hard time believing that, and there's the capitalization on the conundrum for me, alliteration, is this: no blind man nor lame shall enter the house. That's the Hebrew modern thing, same thing. What does it say in our, yeah, and he should be, the blind and the lame shall not come into the house. Were they trying to? You know what I mean? Were they, what's going on, right?
Since you mentioned that it might be the temple, the house, when Jesus was around, most of the people they couldn't enter.
Right, right,
It could have been cut. What was the condition afterwards?
right. And to be fair, blind, lame, weren't there people who could not enter the temple? Jewish laws? I don't know them all. There's 613 of them or 611, depending on who you ask. What's that?
Couldn't serve as priests.
No, certainly not. Certainly not. I wouldn't be able to. I'm hearing impaired. Eileen?
Are they talking about spiritually?
You know, it doesn't seem to be that way, only because they really seem to accentuate their physical infirmities as contrasted against the healthy warriors on each side. So David stayed in the stronghold, called it the city of David. What do we got here? I want to read from so we're all on the same page, literally. So David dwelt in the fort and called it the city of David. You say, you can't name it after yourself. Well, from the next paragraph, it's clear that David perceived that the Lord had established him king over Israel and that he had exalted his kingdom for his people Israel's sake. Not that unusual.
That's what kings always do.
What's that?
That's what kings always do.
Exactly right. It's not unusual at all.
Alexandria.
Yep. So the blind and the lame shall not come into the house, they said. And maybe they were talking about Jerusalem as the larger segment of the house. I don't know. They often did speak in generalities. That's not an impossibility. But boy, if well, let me read one last thing here. A lot of people are looking at this word for conduit or gutter. What is it? Senor. Some people say that it refers to like the windpipe, or even another part of the anatomy of the Jebusite males. But there's no evidence, this author says, in the Hebrew for senor being anything other than a water channel or a tube, which, by the way, David probably knew how to get into Jerusalem via 100 different ways. So he's going up the water channel, or this gutter, and knows how to get in. Whoever gets up the gutter kills the Jebusites and the lame and the blind that are hated of David's soul. It gets me, that are hated of David's soul. Is it just the lame and the blind that are hated of David's soul, or is that sitting alone as in a positive, or are they grouping them together with the Jebusite? These people are enemies. Where, Rebecca?
That's where I got the thought about the human shield thing, because if they're using them as the buffer,
Yeah.
David's men might hesitate, thinking, I'm gonna go hacking through these old, crippled, blind, lame people, you know what I mean? And trying to work them up into a frenzy that they are not gonna hesitate when it comes to taking the city.
Yeah.
That's my mind
Yeah.
frame with there.
Kim.
You know how, mentally ill people were said to be favored of God?
Oh, sure.
You know, maybe that was some kind of a heathen
Could be.
tradition with
Could be.
Christianity, you know,
Yeah.
that maybe they were held in some kind of special class or esteem or something.
Yeah.
Touched by God.
And there is a possibility that we haven't quite explored yet. It is an unsavory possibility, but we do know that the Hebrews viewed physical infirmity and sinfulness very linked together. That's just what they did. And you say that's wrong. I'm not going to say whether it was right or wrong. There's probably an element of truth to it, especially when you consider the end of Mark 16 and you consider some of the New Testament promises about being free of disease from the Lord. I'm just saying that this is a Hebrew tradition that goes all the way back to the time when Jesus finally dispelled that and said, look, he never said it wasn't necessarily true either. He just said there's not going to be no exceptions to this. This particular guy, is not because of sin. So it is distinctly possible, though I would hesitate to say probable, that David is seeing the blind and the lame as being in their state because of their opposition to the one true God. And here's the weird part about it. If he did think that, he may very well have been right. Something to consider. So that was fun, and I'm still stumped, and so are you, and that's going to be all right. Right, exactly. And I think that's actually what this author here, Robert Alter, concedes.
Does make sense.
Yeah. And David would, but here's what's really cool. I think we see this rising above, kind of rising to the surface. It's David's exceptional leadership here. We know David as a great leader, but he really hasn't had the opportunity to show this kind of leadership since back when he was in his element under Saul. Now he's got troops again. I mean, not just a band of mercenaries, right, like he did before. Now he's a king. And now that he's a king, look what happens. He acts like a king. He's a lion. And he does what has to be done to get God's house back. Oh, and by the way, when Jesus comes back, there's going to be a lot of humans. You okay, son? Got something in your mouth that's not food? All right, let's not do that again, okay? Not trying to put you on the spot. So, yeah, when Jesus comes back as a warrior king, as a lion instead of a lamb, maybe some of us will be, God, these are blind and lame people. How in the world can you be wiping them out? He's going to do whatever it takes to reclaim the city. Yeah. And we're going to look at our King David. Come on, King David, literally. And we're going to say, glory and honor and power and blessing be unto our Lord. Yeah. And your way is right. And the judge of all the earth, by the way, will do right. And where we see blind, feeble, crippled people, Jesus sees deeper. That's my only hope. Amber?
Where it says that, and the blind and the lame that are hated of David's soul, and then wherefore they said, the blind and lame shall not come into the house. Do you think they took what he said and went much further than he meant? Because those people right there that are hated of David's soul, not all blind and all lame were hated by David's soul, just those people who were setting themselves in opposition were the enemy, and they may have taken it further than he meant.
Well, the way the scene plays out, David shouts, whoever gets up there, kills the Jebusite, and kills the lame and the blind that I despise, you will be chief and captain. Then they say, the blind and the lame shall not come into the house. So, what's that? Oh, okay, sorry. We have this great divide of a camera between us. We're going to be together again, though. It will happen. I will receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also. But anyways, yeah, so then they said, the blind and lame shall not come into the house. Interesting observation is that David is not recorded to have said, the blind and the lame shall not come into the house. particularly because David was known to receive one, you see, eating at the king's table for the rest of his life, right, and Ryan?
When you read that David is saying you should be chief and captain, and then turns around and says, wherefore they said,
Right.
who was he talking to? He was talking to his men, right? He wants to be the one that goes through the channel.
Oh, yeah.
So he's talking to his men. So I believe they are their men. They say, fire up and say, hey, we are not going to let this
Yeah.
go in.
That's what it seems like to me, is that these guys are fired up. And if David, I think, didn't say, whoever gets up the water spout, down came the rain of that, I messed myself up. All right. Whoever gets up this conduit, this water conduit, the water gate, and smites the Jebusite and the lame and the blind that are hated of David's soul, he shall be chief and captain. I am considering the possibility that if he did not say that, they would not have been rallied to rout these people. They wouldn't have found that intestinal fortitude to do what needs to be done. It is a distinct possibility that there is a really pitiable aspect to these people, that human shield, metaphorically or physically, are being used to mitigate their own destruction. And David said, it's not going to work.
And like you said, Jerusalem sometimes refers to the house. So he's talking they're not going to come to Jerusalem.
Right. Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. Ryan and Kim.
Do you think the blind and the lame would be treated differently if David was king? Do you think they were treated differently back in the old kingdom? That's why they were fighting, because they knew in previous kingdoms, I don't know how they would know this.
Yeah.
Fly on the wall.
Right.
Do you think they could have been different? Like, let's say they don't have, like, let's say, I'm not sure if this happened back then, but they gave them like money or something like that, or they every week or something like that, everyone got a meal or something like that. Do you think if they were afraid of those liberties being taken, and that's why they decided to fight, other than, because we don't know why they,
Yeah.
you know, so
Yeah.
it could be maybe he has a policy, you know,
Yeah.
like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well,
Something
they
like that.
may have been acquainted with some of the Jewish stringencies toward temple worship, but Judaism, when practiced correctly, made sure that these guys didn't get left behind. But that's a really good observation, the motives of the blind and the lame to fight. Perhaps they were going to lose their $1 a week, so to speak, if they did not succeed. They were considering what life would be like under the new regime. Kim, then Pastor?
If you're blind, you can't fight, and if you're lame, you can't fight.
Well, you can block if you just all in guard.
Yeah.
You'd have to sever.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say it.
I would not be fighting if I was lame or if I was blind.
We're right there with you,
If
Lucy,
you
that's
were
for
blind,
sure.
You wouldn't be able to take care of yourself. And I'm pretty sure if they didn't bribe them, they 100% gave them
Oh, I
something
wouldn't
like that.
be
You
Yeah.
will get this. You'll be like
That's-
a weak
I
crash.
would,
It
that's
makes
what I-
sense because if you're so like back then, if you were blind or deaf, I'm not deaf, but blind or lame, you were a dog. Literally, you were treated as a dog. That's what
Yeah,
you
you
were.
were
You had no purpose in
yeah.
society. You had no physical strength.
Well, so
They
you
were garbage.
would be a soldier then, how could you fight if you were blind?
That's
Well, no,
that's.
you'd be a human shield.
You would be a
That's what
human
they're saying.
shield. That's what they're saying. They
Oh,
would
I
all
didn't know human
they would
Right.
like I said, they consider them as dogs. They're useless. I mean, other than cleaning up trails, go out swinging. You know. That's
So, Kim, you had something.
This is very basic.
Yeah, you're okay.
Am I correct in assuming these Jebusites were heathens?
Yes.
So
That's-
they,
yeah.
They weren't driven from the
Well, I'm
land.
glad I was.
That is, I think that's a particularly important observation because I've assumed that. I tend to believe it because they were occupying the holy city and they didn't, because it said all the elders of Israel, they all came down and made a pact in Hebron with David. Jebusites weren't involved, probably opponent, but there's still a point of clarification needed to be made. Not necessarily. In fact, Pastor?
Traditionally, Middle East, in the Eastern tradition, if you were wounded, blind, lame, anything, well, we find even all throughout the Bible, where did they congregate to ask for alms?
That's right.
At the gates, at the passageways, at the roads. And so all the major entrances to the city, you have this grouping of the handicapped and the
Yep.
blind, and
Yep.
and so basically they probably, I think it just points to you have
You had to fight,
you
you're
have-
forced to fight.
Well, I
No.
don't think necessarily they were recruited.
If I was blind
Yeah.
or if I was lame.
Yeah, I don't think necessarily they were recruited to fight Lucy. I think that the Jebusites were taking advantage of the fact that these were helpless people and they were saying David's never going to come in here and charge this place because there's too many innocent people nearby that are going to be hurt. And David says, the collateral damage is on you guys. You're the ones who didn't shelter the innocent and the blind and the lame. You should have, but we're going to take this city back. And your abuse of humans, your violation of human rights is not going to stop me from doing what I know I have to do. It's on them. A partial example, an inferior example, and a broken example, but one of the best ones I can come up with from modern time is Nagasaki and Hiroshima. I am not an atomic bomb guy. If I was on the committee, I would have had to step away. I'm a big defender. I get that, but I just can't. I'm not saying we shouldn't have dropped the bomb. Please, everybody listening, don't use that as a reason not to come back. I'm not saying we shouldn't have dropped the bomb. But what consequences it had for the innocents? All why? Because Hirohito would not surrender. And then, and you say, well, that's terrible. Oh, no, because it took 2 days before we went after the second city. You see, or at least a day and a half before we went. Hirohito didn't acknowledge us, or he didn't surrender after the first one. And you say, that's callous and terrible of America. He's the one who forced our hand into a second bombing. And you say, that's unethical. I can't really, I don't know about, it is a very full and pregnant discussion, the ethics of the atom bomb. No question about it. But just by way of example, you can blame the Americans for dropping the bomb, but the Americans shouldn't have had to in the first place. So you can blame David for the lame and the blind being killed, but he shouldn't have had to do it in the first place. Kim?
Well, I mean, we found out now that is during the wars in the Middle East, that was a Muslim stratagem, is to,
Yep. Women and
put
children.
your weapons into a hospital or a school.
Yep.
And use those people,
That's right.
all these Americans, they'll never come after,
Uh-huh.
they're safe.
And
They won't
strapping
fall
bombs to
hospital.
kids, Ryan?
Let's see if I had it and then I lost it.
Atomic bomb, Hiroshima,
Oh,
Nagasaki.
it would. I'm not. Was it either we send because I believe with the reason bombs, they have very very good defenses. So I believe it would cost us more. That's why they bombed because I believe it would cost us such a great toll to take the city. Either we sacrifice, I don't know, it must have been at least. I mean, for them to drop a nuke, it must be at least 100,000.
Sure.
It depends on what I'm
Sure.
giving them credit.
Yeah.
Or we kill millions.
Yeah.
So it's either do we take the enemy out or we take ourselves out.
Yeah.
But they're not the enemy, they're killers. So.
And it's tragic, and I will say this, as an American, if I were living in the days after Pearl Harbor, I would be cheering them on to build the atomic bomb faster, and maybe you would too. It's tricky looking back, isn't it, how we can so easily put ourselves in yesterday's shoes and Monday morning quarterback all of history in the world. But in reality...
That led to terrible things like interning all the Japanese citizens.
Yes, it
here
did.
in the States.
Yes, it did. There were, and here's the crazy, nasty, pragmatic part. They did that for a reason, because they were concerned about insurgents. If they didn't, would there have been insurgents? Did we effectively mitigate an insurgency, an insurrection? And I don't even like to think about that, because at this point, we're done choosing the lesser of two evils. Now we're choosing the lesser of two great, tremendous, vile evils. And I tell you what, people say, well, Trump and Biden. I get it. It's definitely a lesser of two evils situation for a lot of folks, but it's nothing compared to the moral conundrums that we faced just a generation ago. Yeah. Adam, you had your hand up?
Yes, in relation to Kim's comment, I remember during the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, because it was both wars at the time, I was in high school, and there were these reports that people kept going into mosques to hide out and discuss their strategies. And the military was like, okay, if you're going to keep doing that, we're going to start blowing up mosques.
Yeah. And again, we'd say, oh, that's terrible, that's awful. Right, but what is greater? The loss of, okay, how about this? What's the lesser collateral damage? People that are in the mosque, as tragic as that is, or the innocents at the next stadium event or football game. You understand? It's all about loss mitigation. As tragic as that is, I'm just thankful it's not my job to make those calls. Let's wrap up this text. David grew great. The Lord of God of hosts was with him. The Lord God of hosts with him. Hiram, more of a title than a name. The king of Tyre sent messengers to David. Cedar trees, carpenters, basin. They built David an house. Is that the temple? No, I just think it's talking about his domicile. Right. David perceived that the Lord had established him a king over Israel. David took more concubines and wives out of Jerusalem. Well, here's the thing. Now, you're not just the anointed king. You're not just king over Judah. Now you're mega king. So you get mega wives. Do you see how this works? Names the city after himself. I'm not saying that's a bad move, but I am saying it's a very expected move. Takes concubines. Yes, a bad move, but also a very expected move. David is going the way of kings. He's doing what kings do. This is one of the big reasons why God said, I really don't think you guys should have a king, but when you have it your way, it just tastes better. And they said, yeah, we want it our way. Well, there you go, man. Oh, boy. Anyways, but what mercy of God, huh? To look at the rampant moral collapse, the ethical implosion of polygamy, and for God to say, I made a promise to my covenant people of Israel, I'm not going to wipe them out. This is part of being a king, and I said I'd let them have it their way. And here's the really crazy part, is all of these wives that David took, God is recorded later as having said, I gave you those wives. I don't think God condones polygamy, but I am saying that God gave David the position to acquire those wives. Deuteronomy 17:17 says, don't multiply wives to yourselves. Some translations would say, don't acquire more wives. One is enough. And you say, oh, joke about miserable wife. No, I have an amazing marriage. It would not be an amazing marriage if I had another woman to compete for my affections. Or my sexual drive. I don't know how else to put that. I'm sorry. I wouldn't have to love a concubine. I wouldn't have to love a second wife. But imagine how any wife in this room would feel if your husband was going home to somebody else every other night. Even if it were expected in your culture, I know we got some looks of I don't think so. But even in a culture where that's expected, I don't think. Let's just really quick. Let's pull a name out of a hat here. Oh, I'm sorry. We weren't giving names to the wives. We were giving names to the children. So let's call one of them. What? A wife?
Oh, I thought we were talking about children.
Oh, I know. At first we were. Peter would not be the wife's name. It might be. Yeah, Petrine, yeah. So we'll choose Mary Catherine, okay? We're going to go with that one. Because we had Peter, and then I'm going to the other Orthodox, right? So David marries Mary Catherine. Mary Catherine probably has no expectations that she could enjoy intimate time, coffee, sandwiches, drinks, pillow talk. She's not under any illusion. She knows she's going in as a political trade to be David's property, to be in his harem. You understand my point? Harem, excuse me, Hiram. I just read Hiram, king of Tyre, sorry. To be in his harem, to be a member of his collection. I don't believe for a second she's under any illusion that she's going to be the one. David already had the one, and it was Michal. And then he had another one because Michal was removed, and it was Abigail. In addition to the Jezreelitis that he'd already acquired somewhere, you see. I think he was impressed by Abigail, for what it's worth. But anyway, well, who wouldn't be? She's everything anybody wants. She's the living Barbie doll, according to the scriptures. You understand? She's perfect. So, yeah, so David multiplies wives to himself, ethically implodes, and you say, David's a man after God's own heart. How could you possibly do that with Bathsheba and Uriah? Are you kidding me? Look at the writings in the sand. He still is doing what kings do. So then what does it take to be a man after God's own heart? To be perfect? I sure hope not. It takes what David exhibited that other men didn't was repentance. Psalm 51, Psalm 38, over and over he said, I cannot believe I did this. They obviously didn't view polygamy as grievously as we do today. That's perhaps one of the benefits of the evolution of Christian thought as we progressed. But anyways, let me try to wrap this up. I'm sorry. Just in these last three paragraphs, or three sections here, there's the one similar principle. Philistines heard, David's king. Let's go wipe him out. No. No. You have been wiped out consistently by David. Why are you trying now that he's more powerful than ever? Maybe they were trying to stop it before it started. David actually sought God this time. God said, go for it. And David went for it, destroyed him. More on destroying them later at the last part. After this, the Philistines came up again, because sometimes they don't learn. I'll just put it that way. I was going to use all sorts of illustration. And they spread themselves in the valley of Rephaim, and David said, am I going to go up for it? Nope. God said, don't do it. Aren't you glad you asked, David, right? God said, I want you to rest. The mulberry tree. You're going to hear what sounds like troops marching. And the ornaments on their ankles of the troops are going to sound, they're going to hear them ringing. You're going to hear the marching of troops. And I don't know how it's phrased here in English. Give me a second. Yeah, when thou hearest the sound of a going in the tops of the mulberry tree. This wasn't wind. A going would have been a progression, a march, an army march. That's what that refers to. And when the army marched, it wasn't just footprints. You had the armor. He heard the sound of an army in the mulberry trees. And when he heard it, that was his cue. Then shall the Lord go out before thee to smite the host of the Philistines. And David did so, as the Lord had commanded him, and smote the Philistines from Geba until thou come to Gazer. I like the whole, from Geba until you come to Gazer. It's like an old fisherman giving directions, you know what I mean? I'll take Route 1 over to 196 there. You know, I just hear it, the narrator just describing it. Two more very quick observations. Notice how God said he was going to smote the host of the Philistines. And the very next section it says David did. It's a contradiction in the Bible. Throw it all away. Walk away from the faith. No, it's actually a beautiful synchronicity. How do I put this? A beautiful harmony of God doing it through his servant. Same as he does in the New Testament. And then the last thing I wanted you to notice is this. And if you have any more input, I'd love to hear it. We're still doing well on time. David came to Baal Perazim. We say Baal Perazim, Baal Perazim. And David smote them there. This is the first smiting. And said, the Lord had broken forth upon mine enemies before me. There's the principle again. David did it, but it was the Lord who did it. He said, I don't want to sound superstitious, you know. I don't want to give God credit for everything. Well, sometimes it's especially needful for us to say, you know what, God? I did it, but I think you did it through me. It's appropriate to do that and needful for us. So here's what I want you to notice. Therefore, he called the name of that place Baal Perazim. And there they left their images, and David and his men burned them. Cool ending, but think of this. Baal Perazim, if you look that up in just any old, this is just kind of a help, practical help. If you look it up, Baal Perazim would mean the possessor of the breakings or something. And you say, well, that doesn't make any sense. No, just like if you look at the Hebrew tetragrammaton, the YHWH, the I am that I am. If you don't have that ascribed to a person, I'm pointing my arm because I want it on my arm. I want the name there. But I have it on my bracelet. Wristband. Bracelets are for girls. Wristbands are for boys. But if you don't have those 4 Hebrew letters associated with the divine God, they don't mean as much. And you'll say, well, who's this I am that I am? The Hayer Asha Hayer, right? What does this mean? Same thing with Baal Perazim. If you look at it as just a word, it's the possessor of breakings. And you say, what in the world does that mean? But break it down differently with the knowledge of their deity. Baal. Perazim, to break down. David is literally naming this place after the fact that this place looked like the Hoover Dam after a cruise missile. God broke through their ranks. And he named it the place that God broke through, Baal. Believe it or not, and I mean that very sincerely, whether you believe it or whether you don't believe it, spiritual warfare was a very present reality in the life of the Old Testament saints and in the New Testament saints and in Jesus the prophet. We're talking about Jesus Christ. Jesus as the prophet. David was fully aware that when he defeated the Philistines, it was actually God defeating Baal. Paul was aware, Jesus was aware that when he was going to the cross, he was submitting himself to his killers, but he spent the last week of his life poking the bear. You understand what I'm saying by that? Don't tell anyone what you've seen and heard. Don't do any of this. And then he goes into Jerusalem for the last week of his life and does nothing but agitate the religious leaders. And then when Pilate has him before him, he agitates Pilate. He didn't even answer him. He could have pled his cause and got Pilate all riled up. All Jesus did was poke the bear, and it eventually killed him. Why? Yes, the people killed him, but Jesus recognized there was a present spiritual reality that was killing him. He gave his life up to satisfy, well, I don't want to get into propitiation and atonement, but let me just skip to Paul. Paul was aware that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. So you have from David to Jesus to Paul, there is an overarching spiritual reality that we tend to diminish. And I'm not saying there's a boogeyman under every rock and a demon behind every Harry Potter book, okay? I am, however, saying that there is still a present evil spiritual reality against which we combat. How, Pastor? Oh, the same way God uses us invisibly and humanly, it's the same way that the spiritual evil power uses humans, invisibly and spiritually. If you think that people came up with ideas like abortion and transgenderism on their own, I'm not mocking you, but I would say that I think it deserves another visit. I think we ought to rethink that. That's not, by the way, just this, I'm so sorry, just hear me out. Evolutionarily speaking, transgender, and I have no hate toward transgender folk, come on, you know my heart. Transgenderism, homosexuality doesn't make sense. If we really are more of an atheistic agnostic, which atheism fastest growing in America, we get that. If we really do buy that we're just people dancing to our own DNA, then there is a strange anomaly in the formula of homosexuality and transgenderism because we're not able to reproduce, you understand the point? There is something interceding in human development. And that's if you buy evolution. If you don't buy evolution, the reality is just as strong. Although a lot of times I'll concede the evolutionary fact just to join in and defeat the opponent just as well. So my whole point, I'm sorry, Saints, is while naturalism may seem tempting in an age of science and tech and cell phones and internet and flying cars, literally, there is and always will be an element of spiritual darkness that oppresses humanity and wars against the light. I think it was John who said the spirit lusts after the flesh and the flesh lusts after the spirit. There's a battle. Always will be. Amber? Oh, I thought you had your hand up.
But I have my hand up.
All right, Lucy.
I was thinking about David and Goliath, way back there, one of the favorite science fiction stories.
I sure do.
And David can't really take the credit for having killed Goliath because it was God that shot that little stone right up there and hit him right in the spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the way David's whole life went.
Oh,
He
yeah.
can't take the credit for knocking off all those lame people and blind people, which I would not have been in the group there.
Yeah.
I know everybody else, you think that if you were lame and blind, that you would be there.
I wouldn't know what was going on, man. I'd just be begging for alms.
Hiding out, they would not find this blind
All right.
person or this lame person. I would be hid out, but anyway, David, it was actually God that defeated all the lame and blind people there.
I believe that, yes. And you know what's interesting, Lucy? There's another component to that, another layer. We're still doing really good on time. Another layer where God didn't just automatically grant David magical powers. He had David prepared from his youth up to be excellent with the sling, to be brave against the lion and the bear. God supernaturally had put these things in David's past so that he could be prepared to face Goliath. And then when it mattered most, David was right there with God and God was right there with David. Pastor?
David actually illustrated that in Psalm 18.
Yes.
He just my hands to war.
That's right.
Give me the strength where a band of steel is broken my arms.
Yep.
God gave the victory, but I did it.
And another
God killed
component,
me.
yeah.
I did it.
That's and I believe that same psalm, even the same stretch there. By God, I have jumped over a wall. By God, I've run through a troop. And so those two really cool descriptors, you say, well, how did he run through a troop and jump over a wall? They might certainly be poetic. After all, it's a poem. But David is saying that everything that he has done, which I don't doubt that he jumped over a wall and ran through a troop, but everything that David had done, he was attributing credit to Yahweh. And you say, well, that's a classical, very Jewish, Bronze Age thing to do. Oh, I know. And I think that our society and our civilization at large, if we were to embrace some of these old Bronze Age Jewish practices, to be real honest with you. Yeah, Pastor?
He did go through the wall, through the water spout.
Ah, that's true.
And you have a broadsword and there's a bunch of people, one good swing, you're going through a bunch of people.
That's true. Run through a troop.
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
I wasn't
Well,
talking to you.
listen, sweetie.
Yeah, right?
Listen up.
Come on, Siri. But yeah. Yes, Trig.
Siri was on for a while.
Was she
No
really?
way.
She was.
Get out of
She
Dodge.
heard everything. Kevin said.
Oh, great.
Then I was all serious.
Now we're going to have the cops called on us. What's this I hear about David and killing people? Who's David in your church?
Swinging swords and sewer lines.
Kim.
You know, the Jews never would have lost the battle.
What's that?
The Jews never
Oh,
would
yeah.
have lost the battle.
Oh, yeah.
If they had inquired of God,
Yep.
you know, if he was their captain.
That's exactly right. And if they didn't treat the ark as a totem,
Yeah.
you know, and they actually focused on the God of their salvation, not the salvation of their God. Isn't it? Oh, and you know what's funny? I was on Reddit. Sorry, I'm not trying to burn your time. I was on Reddit. Oh, did you have something, Amber? Okay. I was on Reddit, and I don't know how I stumbled across this thread, but somebody was likening something to a television program that I've never seen, and it's called Supernatural. Again, I've never seen it. It doesn't appeal to me right now. It might be a fine show. I have no idea. But he was describing one of the episodes, and he said, not a good show? All right, good to know. He was describing one of the episodes, and then he said, well, so-and-so, one of the characters' names, lost his powers when he started trusting in the relics of God and not in the God of the relics. And I was like, wait, I've seen that before. I've seen that in history before. We're lifting from the greatest story ever told to our modern day because they are the greatest stories ever told. And you have to go back and look for a regress and say, well, where's the first time that story was told? I'd say the Bible. I'd say that these events are historical and original and authentic. And yes, there may be allegorical expressions. I've accepted that. It sits with me well. Yes, there may be poems. Yes, there may be wartime expressions. There may be things that are recorded from human perspective. There may be whatever you want to call it. All of these things may be true, but it's all true within the sphere of the Bible being an authentic record that ultimately points to Jesus Christ. We've got to access our ancient inner Israelite when we read the Bible, when we read especially the Jewish scriptures, these scrolls. Who are we, modern Americans? Come on. You've got to enter into their world, read the scripture, and it is then that they, more than ever, point toward Jesus Christ. It's phenomenal. Some today would say, well, you can't use Isaiah 53 to evangelize. It's talking about Israel. And there are some solid arguments, and most Jews today believe that it's talking about Israel. But my problem is Philip literally went to the Ethiopian eunuch, a Jewish convert, and used that same text to convince him that Jesus was the Christ. Hate to break it to you, but I'm thinking that this Ethiopian Jewish convert knew his Bible pretty well and would have said, that doesn't jive, if he didn't think it jived. But instead, we're just after Jesus' ascension. Things are hot off the press, and then you say, Isaiah 53, this is talking about Jesus. The Bible is a unified story that leads to Jesus. And don't ever think it's not, because it really, totally, definitely is. And David, I was doing Bible time with Anya. I'm not even going to apologize anymore. This is my last story, and then I really am going to shut up. Just watch, or listen, or not. I was doing Bible time with Anya, and we were at the part in her devotional booklet where it talks about how the throne is never going to depart from David. And I said, because the text itself said, I removed my love from Saul, but I'm never going to remove it from David. You see, remember that text that's in the Bible? And anyways, and he said, but I'll never remove it from David. David's throne's going to last forever. And then I said, Anastasia, do you know who David's great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson was? No, who? I said, it was Jesus. I said, Jesus was born a king in the line of David. And I loved it. It was such an aha moment for her. Her eyes got wide, and she goes, oh, no way. I was like, yes, it all comes together, you see. And so for people who say it's fiction, I appreciate and I understand the arguments, and I have a lot of time to listen to those arguments. But at some point, you can't falsely connect a book that was at the latest written 700 years before Christ to this amazing advent of this man, who then went on to live a life like no other. The Bible points to Jesus. So when you read David, take it easy on him. He's a human, and he's a picture of what it looks like to be a human king, so that we can really appreciate our divine and human king. Any other thoughts or anything? Why are you pointing? Oh, the prayer letter. Yeah, we'll tackle that, I guess, after the live stream. Everybody good? I'm gonna cut the live stream and we're gonna read